Pokémon. When you hear that name, there are so many things that you could think of, and it's because Pokémon is an iconic piece of media. Regardless of how you feel about the franchise, you have to admit that they are huge. Like, Pokémon Go is still doing gangbusters unless you're a hyper-contrarian or something and refuse to look at the numbers. And why is Pokémon so popular? It probably has to do with the concept of catching these unique and outlandish monsters and then battling them. Add in the world of Pokémon itself and the cool ability of evolving your Pokémon, and you had a recipe for success. Then you throw in the anime, which is basically why Pikachu is everywhere now and why some people equate a frying pan to a drying pan, and you had the makings of a franchise. I mean, look at Pokemon now. We just had the new games come out and the Detective Pikachu trailer already has so many views. It's clear that Pokemon is here to stay, and that probably means we will have a lot more games, unless some Pokemon killers step in the way. And speaking of games, what about all the spin-offs? There was the Puzzle League, you could take pictures of Pokemon, you could be a Pokemon warlord, or just play as Pokemon. But what about that time we played as Pokemon Rangers? From what I can tell, Pokemon Ranger was an idea that sort of served as the teaser for Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. You can see this with how it was released like 5 months before Diamond and Pearl, and how you could send exclusive eggs to be hatched in those games. Unless you were in America, then it was more like a year difference between the games for some asinine reason that I can only assume is because Japan literally hates America. There's also the fact that the original title for the game was Pokemon Ranger Road to Diamond and Pearl, so you know that's a pretty clear connection right there. As for the actual development, it was co-developed by everyone's favorite HAL Laboratory and Creatures Inc., who later went on to develop the later sequels on their own, as well as Detective Pikachu much later. It's interesting to note that this development duo also worked on Earthbound together, which is a fun fact, I guess. While I didn't find out too much about his development, there was a lot of promotion done on good old Pokemon Ranger. Like, my god, you had a teaser at the end of the Lucario movie, nods to the game in the TV show where one episode involved Deoxys, and then there was that movie that later became a manga. If you had even a passing interest in Pokemon at the time, you probably knew about this game because, hey, it's a Pokemon game and they're not going to advertise it. But that's enough about the pre-game. It's time to talk about the peri-game, the actual game. Since the gameplay is probably what most people nowadays remember Pokemon Ranger for, and since it's the most defining feature of the game, I'll talk about that first. You're a Pokemon Ranger, not a trainer, so you get a capture styler instead of Pokeballs, but what does that mean? Well, that means that you capture Pokemon by scratching the life out of your touchscreen. There weren't many games out for the DS that caused people to brutally murder the touchscreen quite like Pokemon Ranger. It's probably one of the only games that required you to use one of those crappy touchscreen protectors that fall off when you use the stylus on it once. But hey, it was either that or going to your back alley cesspool known as GameStop and begging an employee who only knows the word Power Pro and $5 pre-orders for a replacement DS. That didn't matter to me though, since when I played the game again for the video, I used the emulator where my mouse was a stylus. But let me go back for a second. When I say capture, I don't really mean capture. It's more of you pacifying Pokemon who have become hostile. And the way you do that is by... I know you circle around them with the spinny top thingy until they don't want to fight, but I actually don't know exactly how it works. Let me check. Alright, you leave a trail of beams that transmit friendship to the wild Pokemon? That's Pokemon, alright. But it's not as easy as it sounds. See, you can't lift up your stylus after you start the circle unless you want to start over, so you have to commit to your circle. And you have to work quick, because if the Pokemon touches the beam or uses a move on it, the circle breaks, which is where the fail condition comes in. When a wild Pokemon uses a move, for example a Golem throwing a rock at the line, you lose a point of health. And when that runs out, you have to run away, forced to try again, but you probably won't even really see this until way later in the game. Past all the capturing, a big part of the game is being in tune with the Pokemon and having them help you out. When you pacify a Pokemon, they'll join the party if all the slots aren't full, and they stay until they help you out. They can do this in 2 ways. The first way is through the environment. This can range from water Pokemon fighting fires to strong Pokemon breaking some rocks for you. And with the theme of the game being the importance of maintaining the balance of nature and all that, you can't take the wild Pokemon back into town. In fact, unless you're a ranger, you probably don't see Pokemon all that often, like on the main regions, but more on that later. The second way that Pokemon help is through the combat sections. Depending on the type of the Pokemon, they do different things to help. It's all about what you need in the moment. Want to hold the little bugger in place? Use a water Pokemon to bubble him up for a bit. Need to cut off the Pokemon's movement but too big to get bubbled? You can use grass and slow them down. You can even strengthen your styler so you don't get rocked, but with 17 types of abilities, you get some variety and you'll find what you like. Either that or you're a skilled god who don't need no Pokemon or something. And that's really all there is to say about the gameplay. It's not overly complex, which allows for the core gameplay to shine through since it's pretty unique. I mean, what other game lets you shoot beams of friendship at monsters? So now it's time to talk about the story, which is a Pokemon story, but not as good somehow. This may sound like I'm hating on Pokemon, but come on, how many people are playing Pokemon for the story? Unless it's Mystery Dungeon or Coliseum or something. The game is broken up into 10 main missions, along with the unofficial stuff that revolves around you, an aspiring ranger rising up amongst the ranks, like us gamers, am I right? You handle a lot of ranger missions, but there's the bigger plot of dealing with the Go Rock Squad, a group of musicians who stole a prototype of the Super Styler, which they plan to use in order to destroy the Rangers because of jealousy or something? Anyway, as the stakes ramp up, the game starts to get harder, especially as the wild monsters start to use more complex moves and you have to fight more than one Pokemon. You get all the way to the end and you have a gauntlet of legendary Pokemon to beat, pacify, and trust me, they're annoying. I had to really focus to get it in the end. I almost didn't finish it, but who would I be if I didn't beat a kid's game? That's right, a loser. Anyway, after you finish up the game, you get the chance to try and capture Kyogre and Groudon, which finally leads up to Rayquaza, which I didn't do because I just got a brand new mouse and I have no desire to abuse it. Really, the story isn't that much to talk about. If I said any more, I would just be telling you what happens in each mission, and if you want that, you can head right over to the Pokemon drug den known as Bulbapedia. Seriously, those are some dedicated people. Despite all of that, the most interesting, or should I say the weirdest part of the story was the region of Fjord itself. It's near Sinnoh, but for some reason it only has Pokemon from regions farther away. I mean, I get that the main Gen 4 games weren't released at this point, and you don't want people's first taste of a new Pokemon to come from some spin-off game, but it doesn't make any sense. Maybe I'm the weird one for getting all flustered at some throwaway line from some event that makes a game worth owning for the diehards or the trade monsters. But other than that, there are no trainers in this region at all. What that means is that you don't have to worry about the local neighborhood stalker fighting you because you decided to lock eyes with him for more than a nanosecond. It's to the point where I'm pretty sure the people of Fjord don't even really know what a Pokeball is unless you've been to the other regions. Since they're all about nature, they just keep the Pokemon by their sides, and if they act up, that's on you. No league, no gyms, no contest, and the only way you're fighting Pokemon is if they're aggressive and they want to square up. The only real form of challenge involving Pokemon are the capture challenges, which have no reward and are only there to help you hone your skills as a ranger. Beyond all that, the region is pretty small, and that's just because the game isn't that long. The game took about 8 hours for me to beat, and while the story itself is pretty short, most of my time came from having to reset later in the game, and the fact that there is little reason to explore the world unless you're trying to collect all the Pokemon. Due to the nature of the game, there are no items to find in the overworld, there's no money to spend because what would you buy? And there really isn't much to do other than the aforementioned capture challenges and talking to people. But I understand. It was the first game in a spin-off meant to advertise another game, and since I have a vendetta against things being long, it's time for my closing thoughts. So, should you play the game? I guess. If only for the novel gameplay, because if the gameplay is unique and fun, it's okay with me. If you can get it for the DS, that would probably be for the best, since this is one of those DS games where they really want you to use the stylus, just like the games that desperately wanted you to use the mic peripheral in your GameCube. And if you don't have a DS, I'm pretty sure you can find one at your local back alley cesspool for like 50 bucks. And if you leave this video with anything, it should be fuck humans, save the trees, our Pokemon live there. But before you go, have a good day.